All right, so today we're diving deep into something pretty fascinating. We're looking at Mark Zuckerberg and Meta and trying to get a handle on like what their vision for the future actually is.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one to tackle.
Yeah, and we're drawing on a really interesting interview that Queel Abram did with Zuckerberg, along with looking at some of the hardware that they've been developing.
What's some really interesting stuff there?
Yeah, so I guess our mission here is to kind of like unpack what that future looks like according to, Meta and Zuckerberg, so that you, the listener, can kind of draw your own conclusions about, whether it sounds like a good thing, a bad thing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that context is so important for people, especially since so many people use Meta's products globally, like understanding where they're headed and what is actually driving their ambitions in the long term. That's really important information.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most interesting things, and I don't know about you, but this is something that really like caught my attention, was what Zuckerberg calls the first full holographic AR glasses that exist in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not just like some far off concept. This is an actual prototype that they've been working on for like 10 years, right? A decade of R&D. And someone on the team even said that they're like real life Tony Stark glasses.
Well, that paints a picture.
It does, right?
I mean, and the actual engineering that has to go into making that even possible is pretty wild. This is full 3D holographic images projected into your field of view, but they're in glasses, not a headset, right?
Yeah.
So the miniaturization alone, that's already suggesting, a future where computing can be invisible and ubiquitous, unlike the devices that we kind of have to, conspicuously use today.
Yeah, and it's not just the hardware, it's also the like potential applications, right? Like think about playing holographic ping pong on your dining room table, or having like a coworker show up as a life-sized hologram for a meeting. Like Zuckerberg was talking about everything from board games and work to totally new educational experiences.
Yes, it's hard to even wrap your mind around like what all the potential could be. I mean, like for this to work, you have to have these tiny micro projectors built into the glasses frame.
Yes.
And there's this waveguide display system, which physically uses these nano etchings, like tiny mirrors in the glass.
Wow.
To guide the light from the projectors into your eyes. So you're literally seeing the image painted in front of you, and it's all happening without any bulky lenses or anything. And then the other huge challenge is making sure the holographic images are synced perfectly between what each eye sees, so you get a convincing 3D effect that actually stays stable in your real world environment.
It really is just mind-blowing, like the level of technology that's packed into these things. They have eye tracking, so the glasses know exactly where you're looking. They've got cameras and sensors to map your surroundings, so the holograms are placed in your room realistically. And then you've got microphones and speakers for interacting with the whole thing. And they can even communicate wirelessly with other devices. Like, they've all set up this prototype wristband that uses neural interfaces.
That's a lot to take in.
It is, right.
And all of this ties into Meta's bigger thinking about how computing has evolved, right? Yeah. So Zuckerberg sees it as this, logical progression from those big mainframes to PCs and then to, the mobile power in our pockets with phones. Yeah. And his argument is that AR glasses are the next step, right, toward making computing something that's everywhere, that feels intuitive, and really importantly, more social.
Yeah, and I think he makes a really good point about phones. He calls them pretty unnatural because of how they tend to pull us away from like the real world happening around us. So the idea behind these AR glasses is to actually reverse that.
Right.
To kind of like bring the digital world into our existing reality and make technology feel more integrated instead of like this disruptive thing.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of thinking about how we interact with technology. And it's important to realize that there are different approaches to AR and VR, right? Like on the one hand, you have those simpler heads-up displays like the Snapchat Spectacles, which just give you some basic visual info laid over your vision. Yeah. Then there are these full-blown holographic AR glasses that we're talking about, right? With the 3D images. And then on the other end, you have those mixed reality headsets like Meta's Quest and Apple's Vision Pro, which give you that more immersive experience by basically blending virtual and real environments more thoroughly.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Meta isn't just putting all their eggs in one basket. Like Zuckerberg talked about this whole multi-tier product vision.
Right.
So at the most basic level, you have the Ray-Ban Meta glasses with no display. Those are focused on AI interaction through voice, right? Then you can have those heads-up displays with more visual AI help and text. And then those full holographic AR glasses that we talked about would be like a premium product. And then the mixed reality headsets would cater to people who need that more intensive computing power and full immersion. So they're kind of hitting every level.
Yeah, it seems like they see all of those as important parts of their long-term plan, catering to different needs and different price points.
Yeah, and despite all these different devices, Zuckerberg really emphasizes a couple of core values that are driving Meta's innovation. The first one is presence in AR and MR. And that means that deep feeling of actually being together with someone digitally, like you're in the same physical space. And then the second one is personalized AI, which uses these powerful models like Llama to give you really specific, helpful advice based on your own life and your surroundings.
And that idea of presence is a big one for Zuckerberg. He really believes it's a fundamental human need and that technology can help us get there. He talks about how communication has changed over time from telegrams to video calls, and these immersive experiences are all about bridging that gap, and making us feel truly connected. He even mentioned missing hugging his mom.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting because it highlights the limits of our current remote communication, right? Yeah. Like we can see each other and hear each other, but we can't touch.
Right.
And that's a huge part of feeling truly present with someone.
Yeah, and he's right. That's the hard part, right? Replicating the subtle things like actual eye contact and the feeling of physical touch, what they call haptics.
Right.
And while they're making progress with hand-based haptic feedback, it's still really tough to create realistic force feedback. Like you'd need to feel like you're actually grappling with someone in a virtual sport. Yeah, still a huge challenge.
That makes you think about what presence really means. Right? Yeah. Because Zuckerberg actually made this point that it's kind of an illusion. In a way. Yeah. It's not about perfectly copying every detail of reality.
Right.
It's about getting enough of the important details, right? So that our brains are tricked into feeling like it's real. He's this example of virtual ping pong, where the sound of the visuals of a virtual paddle breaking out a virtual table created this really surprisingly realistic moment that made people feel like they were really there.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's stuff like a wide field of view, minimal lag, and realistic physics that all contribute to that feeling of being there.
Right. And it seems like our brains are pretty adaptable. Zuckerberg talked about their work with avatars and how people are surprisingly okay with like really realistic looking avatars in a cartoon like virtual world, or the other way around, as long as the avatar moves and expresses itself realistically. So it seems like the way an avatar behaves can be even more important, and how real it looks for creating that feeling of presence.
It's fascinating, really.
It is, and it's kind of weird because we have all these advancements in digital connection.
Right.
But the interview also brought some pretty depressing stats about real-world social interaction.
Yeah, that was kind of sobering.
It is, right? Like in some developed countries, people say they have fewer close friends now than they did even 15 years ago. And the amount of time people spend socializing in person has actually going down, especially for younger adults.
Right.
And even more concerning is that more and more people are saying they don't have any close friends at all.
It makes you wonder if all this digital connection is actually making us more lonely.
Right. Like, is it really fulfilling that fundamental human need for connection?
Yeah.
Zuckerberg acknowledges these trends, but he thinks digital connection can be a good addition to physical interaction, not a replacement.
Right.
Especially for people who are far apart geographically. And Nelson makes a good point that these trends of less social interaction were already happening before we had all this technology, so it's probably more complicated than just blaming the internet.
Right. It's definitely a complex issue with a lot of factors involved.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the other core value, personalized AI.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg sees a future where AI goes from being these general tools, like about awesome real-time translation that we're already starting to see in things like the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, to being these super context-aware assistants that really understand your everyday life and what's going on around you right now. And he thinks glasses are the perfect platform for this, right? Because they're always there and they can constantly pick up visual and auditory information.
Right, and the potential applications are almost limitless. I mean, we're talking about AI that could help you express your emotions better.
Wow.
Or help you with complicated tasks like coding.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, as AI gets more powerful and can handle more of our problems, right? Are we losing out on the chance to grow and learn by struggling with those problems ourselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, what's the right balance between removing obstacles, right, and letting people struggle and learn?
Yeah, and Zuckerberg gave this example of kids learning to code.
Right.
Is that even if we have AI that can write amazing software from just a few words, he still thinks the process of learning to code is valuable, right? Because it teaches you how to think critically and solve problems. Yeah. Like why we still learn basic math even though we have calculators, right? He also talked about language learning, yeah, and how even if real-time translation makes it less practical to learn multiple languages, like the cognitive benefits and cultural enrichment you get from learning languages would still be super valuable.
It's an important point.
It is, and speaking of change, AI is going to totally transform social media too. Like we've already seen this shift from connecting mostly with friends and family to interacting more with creators online, right? And Zuckerberg thinks generative AI is going to speed that up even more. So imagine a future where you have even funnier memes and more interesting content that's made automatically from your own photos and videos, and maybe even AI-powered creators or AI versions of creators that communities can interact with. Yeah. It could completely change how we make, consume, and interact with content online, maybe as big of a shift as the internet itself.
That's a huge thought.
It is. And of course, all this super fast technological change makes a lot of people anxious.
Understandably.
Yeah, what people are worried about what it will mean for their jobs, their relationships, the way we communicate. It's a lot to process.
It is. And Zuckerberg gets that. He acknowledges that feeling of uncertainty.
Yeah.
But his advice is to be curious and remember that technology evolves over time.
Right.
It's not like this one sudden disruptive event. Yeah. He pointed out that the internet and smartphones also change things a lot.
Yeah.
That people who adapt and learn new tools are the ones who find new opportunities.
Absolutely. And something else that I found really interesting with this discussion about open source AI.
Yeah, that was a fascinating part of the interview.
So for people who might not know, open source basically means that the code behind the software is available for anyone to see, use, change, and share.
Like.
And Zuckerberg was contrasting this with the more centralized approach that companies like OpenAI and Google are taking, right? And his argument for open source AI is really twofold. Yeah. First, he thinks it leads to way more innovation because so many more people and organizations can experiment with the technology and build on it, right? Which could lead to a much more diverse and fast-moving ecosystem of AI applications, kind of like the huge variety of apps and websites we have today.
Right.
And second, he thinks open source can make AI safer and more reliable because more people are looking at the code and can spot problems and fix them quickly.
Right.
Just like with open source software.
Yeah, it's like having more eyes on the problem.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of the biggest unanswered questions in AI that Zuckerberg brought up.
Yeah.
The scalability of current AI architectures, specifically these transformer models that have driven so much of the recent progress. So unlike older AI systems that often hit a wall in terms of performance, these models keep getting better as they get more data and more computing power, right? The question is, will that continue forever, right? Or will we eventually hit a limit? Yeah. That's a huge question because it affects how much we invest in computing infrastructure and how fast we expect AI to advance, right? Zuckerberg seems to think the scaling will continue, but he admits it's possible we'll hit a plateau.
Right.
Which would mean we'd need to come up with entirely new ways to build AI systems.
Only a major shift.
It would, so to kind of wrap things up, it's clear that Zuckerberg and Meta are going all in on this future where AR is a seamless part of life.
Yeah.
Where we have this heightened sense of presence and incredibly personalized AI helping us out, but this vision also raises some really big questions about what it means to be human in a world that's increasingly digital and what the long-term impact of super powerful AI will be on society and individuals.
Those are questions we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. I think the takeaway for you, the listener, is that we're at this crossroad life where we have this incredible potential to use technology to connect, learn, and experience the world in totally new ways. But we also have these crucial unanswered questions about how it will affect our relationships and our society as a whole.
Right, like what kind of future do we want to build?
Exactly. And as we move forward, I think it's important to think about what skills you want to develop, both technological and just human skills that will help you navigate this changing landscape.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has.
I hope everyone listening learned something.
Me too.
Really made them think.
Yeah, I think that's the goal.
For sure. All right, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And to all our listeners, we'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.
See ya.